So, my name is Paul McCormack and I'm teaching English here at Grinds 360.
My name is Michael Casey and I'm teaching Irish here at Grinds 360.
Michael, you're famously Dr. Michael Casey.
Yes.
So, you love your subject, you love Irish.
Love it.
Why?
I love Irish because it's opened up so many doors for me. It's done a huge amount for me, I suppose, over the past couple of years. Maybe something I might have found in other subjects itself. But the possibilities with Irish and teaching Irish and all the possibilities it can open up for students is fantastic. And that's why I love teaching it. I'm really, really delighted to be an Irish teacher.
Fantastic. I'm a parent of a student that's in secondary school, and I'm always kind of passionate about the Irish language and him being interested in the Irish language. Is that something that you find that students come into the classroom excited about the language, or do you have to build that when you're teaching?
You definitely have to build it. I mean, you get students coming in who are put off by the poems, the stories, the orals and the essays, so there's an awful lot in it. But one of the best things about seeing them is when they leave the classroom or when they leave your class, that's when you kind of see the real kind of the progress that they've made. That's why I love teaching it as well. It's fantastic, but you definitely have to build up. But you have to know how to build up the subject as well. You can't just kind of hope that they're going to get there, or you can't just hope that they're going to get there themselves. You have to put down, I suppose, steps for the students to follow in order. But it all has to be thought out in advance, how you're going to teach the year, how you're going to teach August, how you're going to teach September, how you're going to teach October. But it's all little by little by little, but massive progress then by the end of the year. And
those little kind of differences between students, I suppose we have to take into account, don't we? Like that we're pitching it at different levels.
Yeah. So I think one of the things in like English as well, you have to be careful about, you have maybe a H4 student in your class and you have a H2 who wants to just top it off a little bit more and get the H1. So there's real kind of differentiation in the class, and you have to kind of aim for the H4, but you also have to give that H1 student something that they can hold on to for the rest of the year, like English itself.
Yeah. For me, well, I just love the material. I always feel I'm real lucky to teach it. So I just want them to enjoy it.
As much as you do.
Well, I don't think they're going to enjoy it as much as I do, but a little bit more than maybe they would otherwise. Yeah. So if they're leaving the classroom and they feel that they've enjoyed, I think they're going to write better. I think they're going to be, more thoughtful in the way they respond, and that's really important to me, to be aware of the fact that they will respond in different ways, But
that comes down to your passion for your subject. That comes down to your drive for your subject as well. So what gave you your passion? What gave you your drive for English?
I don't know. I know it grows every year. Yeah. I know that one of the things I love about teaching English at Leaving Cert especially is the fact that the texts change. Like there's constant change, and I famously don't like change. As we were talking about, but like there are new poets. There's a new poet on this year. Her name is Tracy K. Smith. She's an American poet, and I saw a new poet and I went, oh no. Then I started reading about her and I started reading her work, and then I started focusing on the particular poems that are prescribed, and you feel privileged. This stuff is, how did I not come across this stuff before? Yeah. And then you get to convey that to that person sitting in the room. And I'm aware of the fact that a lot of students on a call or a lot of students in a class might not be interested. But the great thing about this platform is if they don't want to study Tracy K. Smith, they don't have to, because they can pick Patrick Kavanagh, they can pick, so there's variety.
There's options there for the students on the course.
That's the thing about English. I don't know about Irish, but there are options, so they can choose to do certain things and choose not to do other things. So we're trying to cover all of that.
Well, one thing I think with the Irish course is we only have 5 poems and we have 5 stories, and you have to study the 5 poems and you have to study the 5 stories. But the poems give you a lot of scope. The poems give you an awful lot of breadth, and different poems have different topics and different themes, and it keeps things kind of interesting, it keeps things kind of new, and you can kind of learn set phrases as well, I think, for the Irish. So you can learn set phrases for one poem, you can use that again in the second poem. You can use an awful lot of stuff that you can actually just recycle. So having a good phrase bank, a good word bank at the start is real key for getting your top marks in your Irish poetry. But the Irish poems, I like the Irish poems. I know an awful lot of students don't like the Irish poems. I really, really like them. We've got Gavin, which is about freedom. We've got Kulskar, which is about a relationship. We've got Antara here, which is about looking fondly back on your youth. Like, they all have such scope and such breadth that it
so the material is kind of has a universal appeal. So a young person
definitely
can relate to it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. King Lear. I know, and there's a guy in King Lear who just loves to lie, and he takes pleasure in deceiving people. Yeah. And I was saying that's the world we live in today. There are people that there's a kind of a universal quality to the material, and don't be put off by the language. And I'm sure that's the thing that maybe frustrates you. You can see the beauty in the language. I can see the beauty in Shakespeare's language, but maybe communicating that's the difficult thing.
I think you have to find a way around it as well for students and make it kind of appealing to a 16, 17-year-old. I mean, I think that's our job at the end of the day is you've got poems, you've got stories, you've got extra literature, but you have to be able to find a way to make that relevant
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're at nothing.
And of course, then show them how to use that to. I never like to talk about grades, but to get better.
Yeah.
To feel more confident.
Yeah.
To feel that, you know, I after that class, I've made some progress. That's the key, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, I think grades aside, when you find that student that's like H4 coming up to a H3, that's the same joy that you would have
Absolutely.
for H2 coming to a H1. They all have it, and everyone has it. Just pushing yourself a little bit more, get that extra grade, put in a little bit more effort. That's what's kind of key for the students.
And would you say that over your years of teaching this subject to various different types of students, that there'd be kind of common mistakes that you see guys making year on year on year?
I would. It's not really to do with the language, it's more about their approach to the paper. And I think if students actually fixed their approach to the paper, they could do an awful lot better.
Yeah.
One thing is they misplace where to put the emphasis on the paper. Everybody panics about the poems and the stories, but the oral's worth 40%. So if you go into your oral and you read a poem, one of the 5 poems we were talking about a couple of seconds ago, if you read that poem for an examiner, you get 35 marks just for reading a verse or two. But yeah, if you were to study that poem, put that down on paper too, and all the effort and time of doing the emotions, the atmosphere, the life and work of the poet, the imagery, it's worth 30 marks.
Less.
So yeah, it's worth less. So literally in about 30 seconds, read me a poem, you'll get 35 marks. But studying a poem on paper too is only worth 30 marks. So I think if we look at where the marks are going, Leaving Cert's a game.
Yeah, 100%.
And you need to know the rules of the game in order to succeed. If you just step back for a couple of minutes and say, right, where should I put my effort? Into poems and stories that are only worth 5%, or putting it into the orals, which is worth 40%? It's a no-brainer. Yeah. And that's one thing. That's the common misconception I think students have with it. Not really the language, not really the grammar, not really the structure, because there's a lot of scope. Languages have loads of scope. Yeah. And your different styles, and everybody gets rewarded for their styles. But if you just actually look at where the marks are going, that's key. That's the biggest thing.
You're talking to me, and I'm just hearing myself talk. Like in English, there's paper 1 and paper 2, and paper 1 is kind of creative writing, it's language, and paper 2 is literature. But paper 1 has a section that's worth 100 marks out of 400, it's worth 25%. And students, like I've been teaching English since the 90s, and if I hear one refrain, it's, oh, well, you can't study for that. Yeah. Of course you can. Yeah. Of course you can. You can prepare for that. It's worth 25%. Why? And when they made the COVID arrangements, like they reduced the number of marks on the paper. Yeah. That section remained at 100 marks, which meant it was actually worth 40% overall. So that'll tell you what the people designing the exams are saying. Look, this is a really, really important section. Most students don't prepare for it. They look at, for example, study poetry, which I love and I think is great. 12.5% it's worth. Yeah. This is worth 25. So it is interesting. That's phenomenal, man. Yeah. And then time management, is that an issue on the Irish paper? Not for paper 1. Okay. So time management, loads of time on paper 1. About an hour and 50 minutes to write an essay. So about 3 to 4 A4 pages. Yeah. So you can literally think about what you're going to write. Yeah. Write it, step back for a couple of minutes, think about it again, take your time, and develop out your essay. Develop your thoughts, develop your arguments, loads of time. We do run into a big issue in paper 2. Yeah, same we don't really have an awful lot of time because we have to get 2 reading comprehensions, a poem, a story, and an extra literary piece done as well. In paper long? 2, in 3 hours and 20 minutes. That's a lot of work, yeah. So students are really, really pushed for time, but there's a clever knack to it. So if you start off with your paper 1 or your question 1, your question 2 and question 3, I think you're going to run into issues with your timing. But if you just tweak it a little bit and you do certain questions first, you'll save yourself an awful lot of time. Right, and so therefore, because I'm listening to you and I'm going, this is it's practice. Yeah. Practice is key. Knowing what to expect. Exactly. And then practicing. I think full practice, a full run through of a paper. Yeah, so I think definitely go from a question on maybe the reading comprehension straight into a question on prose or a question on poetry. I always find it extraordinary that a lot of students, the only time they actually sit the whole paper is a mock exam. Yeah, it's frightening. and then they go into the real thing. So yeah, that certainly I think practice is really, really important. And looking at strategies for decoding questions, understanding what you're being asked, understanding. I mean, I don't know again about Irish, but certainly for English, I think a lot of people don't really understand what they're being examined on. Yeah. There's this misconception that you can just learn loads of things. Yeah. So like the Leaving Cert play this year is King Lear. So I'd be hoping that anybody who comes on to Grind 360 and watches the material that is already pre-recorded and joins the live classes, they'll know their play really well. Inside out. But that's really like a chef going out and buying ingredients and having the kitchen stocked. What they're being examined on is their ability to recognise what they're being asked. So that's like the order comes in, being able to choose what to use and what to leave on the shelf and then to mix it together. So that kind of analytical quality, that's really what they're being examined on. You have to have the base material, but they're going to, in English it's purpose, they're going to have to show that ability to think critically and use that material in a very focused way.
Thinking on the spot.
Yeah.
That's quite, you don't have an awful lot of time on your paper too, so you really have to be quite quick, but that comes back to practice.
I was about to say, thinking on the spot, usually people who look like they're improvising have improvised 1,000 times before they had to do it under pressure. And that's the key, isn't it?
That also sounds very familiar here.
yeah. We're not doing too bad.
No, we're doing bad. But no, I think practice is definitely key. And one of the things I find with students as well is they're used to sitting tests in a class. So one test, one topic in maybe 30, 35 minutes. And then all of a sudden you said they go into the mocks and now they have to bring everything together. A question 1, a question 2, a question 3. My advice for them is just do a question 1 and a question 2 on the weekend, or do a question 2 and a question 3. Get into the habit of you have 40 minutes to do question 1, down the pen, and then move on to your second question. And that builds up an awful lot of practice for students moving from, it'll help them go through the paper, I think, easier, rather than just doing one question.
It's interesting that you mentioned, like you said, on the weekend. I had an amazing group of 6th years last year. They were super. And they got into the habit, not all of them, but some of them, of coming in. So I'd open up my room somewhere around 7:30, 7:45. And they'd be there at 7:45 or 8 o'clock to do a little bit of incremental practice. And building, even if they were only coming for 20 minutes or half an hour or 40 minutes, just to sit and practice asking questions, answering questions. So useful to them because it builds up that kind of muscle memory, doesn't it?
It's using your time effectively as well. I mean, if you have 15, 20 minutes on the bus, what are you doing? Playing on your phone, going through TikTok, listen to a little bit of music. Why not do something? Why not do something productive with that 15 to 20 minutes? And it's nothing that 15 minutes on the day, that's grand, but the 15 minutes on the Tuesday, you're up to a half hour. That 15 minutes on the Wednesday, you're up to 45 minutes, and it builds up.
And now what they can do, they can have Grind 360 on their phone. They can go and do their knowledge checks. They can do their quotes tests. They can do their, their assessments. Videos.
Look at this content.
Make use of that time. I always say, every student is really relaxed in September, as you would hope they would be. But then you meet them in February, and it's like a different person. But the kid who is very, very, very relaxed in February has done that work incrementally across. So get started early.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. It's
absolutely.
Definitely pace yourself. Don't tire yourself out. But just a little bit, little by little, every day makes a massive difference. Imagine the calmness you feel though when coming up to the mocks, being like, it's grand, I took my time.
And you know that you have done your best.
That's it.
And then what else? What else is there? Well, of course, there's also, and I know this is controversial, developing, hopefully, a love for the subject. And I'm sure you want your students to love Irish, and I certainly want them to love.
H1s are great, but if you can walk out of a classroom, or if you can walk out and think, you know what, it's not that bad, it's actually quite nice.
And I'm a more educated person. I might go and read a book. Absolutely.
That's key. No, I'd love students to actually feel really confident about their Irish. Really confident. Students don't understand that when they leave 6th year, they actually have an awful lot more Irish than they give themselves credit for. A lot of self-deprecating going on. Oh, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that. They're actually an awful lot better than they give themselves credit for. Fair enough, the essays are quite difficult, they're quite tough, and they're quite complex.
But that has to be the case at higher level. There has to be a challenge there. That's okay.
But all that aside, students actually have so much Irish that they should be a little bit more proud of how much they've actually acquired over the 6th year.
And one of the things I really love about the development in education in my, as I said, I've been in it a long time now, is, and again, this might be a controversial thing to say, there was an element of snobbery. There was an element of snobbery in my subject, certainly, I think. The idea that, that the teacher knows everything and that we're the all knowing, force in the room. Now it's a lot more interactive. So that's why I'm really looking forward to doing these, the weekly classes. Because, where, our students are going to be able to watch the material, watch the video content, and then, talk to us and disagree. The thing about English is they can disagree with me. It's brilliant. Because then they're voicing an opinion. That's how they communicate that. That's what I want to develop with them,
But that'll come from you. That comes from your passion with them as well. Them feeling comfortable with you to actually just be like, do you know what? I actually don't really agree with that. What about looking at it this way? And there's a couple of things in Irish as well. On Colscar, a poem about divorce between a man and a woman. And one of the things that it gets mistranslated as Mass na Mílte means the respect of thousands. That's fine, that's perfect. And it's to do with the wife, that she wanted the respect of thousands. But I don't actually think that's an authoritarian move on her behalf, that she wants the respect of everybody. What I think that actually comes down to, and it was a student who pointed this out, if she goes and she moves to the husband's place, if she goes and she takes the husband's name, she loses her identity.
Right.
She becomes John's wife. That's John's missus. Oh, that's John's ball and chain.
Yeah.
So I think in that poem, when it comes to Mass na Mílte, I think she just wants to be known for her own personality, her own identity, and her own name. And I think that's one of the big, that kind of changed me a little bit, because it's very much to jump on the bandwagon and say that the wife was wrong, called Scara, and most of the things do. They tell us that she was wrong, she did this, and she was very selfish, and she wanted wealth and money. But when you read it like that, it totally changes.
Different perspective
on the
fantastic, critical thinking. You see,
that's very good, and that comes from the kids. That comes from the students
themselves.
Actually,
do you know, when you were talking there, I was thinking about one of these questions, which was, what do you enjoy about the teaching? Look, we could talk about that all day.
There's lots. Yeah.
But one of the things is the fact that you learn from your students.
Yeah.
Every day. You know, there's somebody on a human level to do with your subject.
You're kept on your toes.
Absolutely. So I think that's probably the most enjoyable part of the job, is that, you know, interaction with these young people in these formative years.
Changes from year to year as well.
Absolutely, 100%.
You get a new cohort of students coming in for the grinds, and then you learn an awful lot, and then you have a second group coming in then following year after that.
Yeah.
It's a learning curve though, isn't it?
Absolutely. And actually, you mentioned the grinds. One of the other really rewarding things is where you have a student who, you know, there's this misnomer, this idea that grinds, like, you know, that they're undermining your class teacher. What are we there for? We're there to try to supplement your learning. We're there to try to support the learning that you're doing in class. And if if we can do that, if we can add a layer, you know, if we give you an edge, a layer to your knowledge, sure, that's benefiting everybody.
A win-win for everybody.
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
But that's what I love about the on-demand part of it. Sometimes I find that traditional grinds don't really marry what you're doing in class. So you could be doing something in topic A in school. You could have a test next week, but your traditional grinds be like, oh, we're not doing that for another 2 months.
Yeah.
So what's the benefit? At least now I think you get the benefit. Now you get your videos, you get your knowledge checks, you can burst on. It kind of puts it back into the student. That's what I like.
Absolutely. And I love the idea. Like, I'm going to have my plan. There's a fella sitting over there off camera, and he wants my, like, what's the plan for the year, right? Your schedule. But I love the idea that week 7, this is my schedule. But then a student comes on the call and asks a question, and that plan is gone out the window. Because now what I can do is I can deal with that, and that usually is organic, and that'll lead to somebody else asking a question. But then I can just go and record a video to the lesson that was planned and throw it up on the platform, and it'll be there in the live stream.
Yeah.
So fantastic.
A quick question to ask you, right? I've always wanted to know. So for Irish, you have a certain amount of baggage that students would bring into the classroom with them.
Yeah.
A lot of negativity. You get that. That's fine. That's grand. And you can work on that to the year. And then they leave, and then they're like, great, things weren't as bad as I thought. Do you find you get that in English?
100%.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to what I said about rote learning. I used to always think English was easy because I love it. And I don't, I could tell you many stories where I said I'm not a very intelligent human being. Students, they feel uncomfortable in English because, as I said earlier on, knowing the material is not enough. So they come in with this kind of sense of unease. If I learn this material off, am I okay? And you're saying, yeah, you're okay, but you can be better than that. Yeah. You know, you can learn how to use it. So I think that's, for me, the consistent baggage that they come in with, that fear. I suppose, you know that idea of FOMO, fear of missing out?
Yeah.
There's another one, fear of sounding stupid. And that's the baggage. They're afraid of saying something because they suggested something maybe in a class and they got shot down and their opinion was, not listened to. And actually, in English, you're allowed to have an opinion. Obviously, it has to be evidence-based and you have to present it in a certain way and you have to be able to articulate yourself. But you're allowed to have an opinion. Yeah. So I'm happy to say that, like, I'll have recorded video content on, say, a poem by Sylvia Plath, and I'll have said something about an image, and I'll have, I've had it before in class. Paul, my teacher says that means something else entirely. And I will always say, well, yeah, that's okay. Because, we don't know, none of these poets left us a, this is what I meant guide.
Exactly.
Their interpretation is the goal. And obviously there's things you can say which are wrong.
Yeah, but you need your evidence.
Yeah,
so
would you evidence. Once you can support the point with evidence, yeah.
Would you say the marking scheme then for English is
very much
flexible or allows for creativity then?
The marking scheme for English is really interesting. It's PCLM, and very quickly the letters stand for purpose, coherence, language, and mechanics. Now, the last 3 of those, C, L, and M, they're worth 70% of the marks.
Yeah.
And therefore, not what you write, but how you write.
Yeah.
The first 30% of marks are for what you write. But you can't unlock the subsequent marks unless you score well in P. So in other words, if you're looking at a question, I know this is probably too complicated, but if you're looking at a question which is worth 50 marks, your PCLM is 15, 15, 15 and 5. So no matter how beautiful your language is, no matter how wonderful your structure is, if your purpose is off, in other words, if you're not answering the question because you made a mistake of rote learning an essay and you get a P score of 9, well, the maximum score then you can get in the other areas is 9.
So
which I think is a beautifully...
They're kind of weighted together. Like,
that's exactly a beautifully balanced way of assessing it.
I think that's only fair though. It takes
100%.
the students with great memory, it takes them out of the game and allows for just your average student who like looks at a question, reads the question and wants to write towards the question.
Yeah.
That allows them then to
and actually
top marks.
It goes to conversations I've had recently with people about like English in particular as a subject, but AI and sure we can just get the machine to write the essay for us. You can do that. That's grand. But that's like getting somebody else to lift the weights when you go to the gym. You know, you're not developing any skills, and when the time to play the match comes around, you're not able, you're not fit, you're not prepared.
Music, practice.
That's it.
Sports, you go to a gym, train, practice.
Yeah, hard yards.
We have an advantage in Irish though, with ChatGPT. It doesn't really kind of translate the best. It doesn't sound natural. It doesn't sound like grammatically it's great. Like grammatically you'd read and that's grand. But there's just such a humanistic feature missing from it.
Soulless.
Like when I read it, I'm just like, nice try.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. I learned an awful lot about English. I didn't actually realise how much English in the market scheme, even the timing for paper 1 and paper 2, how much crosses over with Irish. I'm delighted I had that chat with you now today.
Yeah, and I tell you what else crosses over is, I love my subject and I can feel that from you as well, which is brilliant. And that's why this project is going to be so exciting.
It's going to be perfect.